Hello, this is part 2 of my video about Ketu, the south node of the moon. And part 1 described the energies and the psychological manifestation of Ketu. But this second part describes the astronomy involved and the myth. The myth is a great key to understanding Ketu. And so this 3-part video on Ketu, because the third part is a case example, namely the astrology of Donald Trump. And this Ketu presentation in 3 parts is actually part of a whole series of videos on each of the planets in Vedic and Western astrology. So the nodes of the moon are the intersection points in space of the apparent orbits of the Sun and the Moon about the Earth. And as such, they're the eclipse points. So where the nodes are in your birth chart and in the heavens are points in space of special sensitivity. They lie on what's called the ecliptic, which is a great circle on the celestial sphere representing the Sun's apparent path during the year against the backdrop of the stars and the constellations. And it's so called because lunar and solar eclipses can only occur when the moon crosses the ecliptic. So that's a bit of a technical point, but it actually has huge energetic effects. Okay, secondly, we measure the position of Ketu in your chart using 2 charts. So Ketu is the south node of the moon, which is our past lives, how they come into this life. Rahu is the north node of the moon, always opposite across the chart, the driven direction of our future, you know, where we're supposed to move to this time in this life. Now, the Western birth chart uses the tropical zodiac. I've done a separate video presentation on which zodiac to use. And the Western birth chart tropical zodiac is orientated to the position of the Sun on the day of the vernal equinox, the first day of spring. And so it's sun sign based, and so in that sense it's psychological. The Sun is at one level our egoic psychology. And so even Western evolutionary astrology, that branch of Western astrology that deals with past life scripts, how to understand them and how to work with them, deals with them in a psychological way. Now, Vedic astrology, on the other hand, is anchored to the fixed, so-called fixed stars. It's anchored to Speaker. And so, unlike depicting the psychological, it depicts the eternal. It depicts our incarnational life purpose, the destiny our soul chose for us to work with this time, the special achievements our soul wanted us to try to seek to manifest in this lifetime. And the 2 zodiacs are actually currently 24 degrees apart. So Western astrology is immensely valuable if it's psychodynamic, you know, making a psychosynthesis declaration of our psychology and our sub-personalities. And it includes, of course, the gods of change, the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto and Chiron. Whereas Vedic astrology is a statement of our incarnational destiny in its totality. So, just to say, and this is maybe important, there is, yes, well, before I get onto the myth, I'll just mention the signs that the nodes do best in. And these are the Vedic signs, which are powerful, sure declarations. So in general, the nodes do best in the Vedic signs owned by Mercury. That's Gemini and Virgo. Rahu, the north node, also does well in Saturn-ruled Vedic signs, Capricorn and Aquarius. And Ketu, with his different nature, the south node of the moon, does well in Vedic astrology's Mars-ruled signs, Aries and Scorpio. And to reinforce that, Rahu, the north node, is the co-ruler of Aquarius. And Ketu, the south node, is the co-ruler of Vedic Scorpio. So again, this is set out in the blog, and of course you can enroll on my courses to study all this in much more detail or have a reading. So, important wisdom can be gained through the Vedic myth of the nodes of the moon, Rahu, north node, Ketu, south node. It's called the churning of the ocean, the churning of the milk ocean, and it happened about at the beginning of time. Both the gods and the demons sought to extract the needed Amrita from the ocean. Amrita is nectar and ecstasy. Both knew they needed it. But neither side could do it on their own. Now the milk ocean is the ocean at the centre of the universe that we call the Milky Way. And the centre of the Milky Way is orientated to Mula Nakshatra in early Vedic Sagittarius. That's the centre of the illumination energy from the Milky Way. So that's where this milk ocean is, in a sense. But neither the gods nor the demons, if you like, are light and are shadow, if you like, are organised rational selves and are unconscious, psychic, fated selves. Neither side was strong enough to do it on their own. The task needs both, as does the task of our life. And so they joined forces. And the gods had to face the fact that they had to employ the support of the demons, the Asuras, to create the momentum needed to churn the milk ocean, to liberate the Amrita of enlightenment and ecstasy, of energetic fulfillment of our human energy bodies. Both our light side and our shadow side must be involved fully if we are to have the nectar. Now the churning rod for this cosmic event was Mount Mandara, and Vasuki, the king of the serpents, who abides often around Lord Shiva's neck, became the churning rope. Here, of course, we have again serpent power, which has its presence in every part of Vedic astrology, and of course into Western astrology with things like 8th house and Pluto. So the demons held the head of the snake and the gods took the tail. Although this did mean that the demons were poisoned by the fumes emitted by Vasuki the snake. But despite this, the gods and the demons worked together. They pulled back and forth on the snake's body, causing the mountain to rotate, and thus churned the cosmic ocean. And they had a bit of a problem, because when the mountain was first placed on the ocean, it began to sink. So Lord Vishnu, the preserver, in the form of a turtle, Kurma, came to their rescue and supported the mountain on his back. Huge meaning in that. So once they started churning the ocean, an enormous amount of foul poison emerged, as it can from our own unconsciousnesses as we live our life. And they stirred it up from the bottom. So this foul poison, vaster and vaster, so horrific it threatened to destroy all of creation. So to avert the catastrophe, what they called on Lord Shiva. They asked him to drink all the poison. This immense task Lord Shiva managed to do. And he drank all the evil and transmuted it in himself, and thus saved creation. Transmutation. And that's why iconographers of Shiva often show him with a blue face. And so because he dealt with the poison, the gods and the demons were able to have the Amrita. He didn't actually swallow it, by the way. He kept it in his throat, the myth says. So in other words, even he could be overwhelmed by shadow. So he held it in his throat and transmuted it. And again, we have to do this with our darkness. That's what we're here for. But unfortunately, the gods and the demons' cooperation sort of ended. There are different accounts of who did what. But it ended up with Vishnu giving each of the gods a drop of the immortal nectar that made them immortal and undying. And it went wrong because Rahu, the north node, the head of the serpent, slipped inside the circle of gods receiving the nectar, and he received a drop, and he was immortal. This was horror to the sky gods, if you like. A demon had received immortality. So what happened was Vishnu got out his, what's it called? Discus, the Sudarshana chakra, and he severed the serpent in two, cut off its head. So Rahu, the north node, is the head of the demon with no heart. Ketu, the south node, is the body and tail of the demon with no head. And those two halves were immortal, they can never die. And so, formless entities of Rahu and Ketu continue forever. We have to deal with our shadows. They're not all negative. And indeed, even dealing with them makes us who we were born to be. And our shadows can be guides if we can perceive them with a proper light and utilize their energies properly. That's what I tried to explain in part 1, my Ketu presentation. So Rahu drives the cravings and the appetites of this world and of each one of us, for the material and for the psychic, including the dark psychic, whereas Ketu dissolves for this world and for each individual, and he forces the inevitable release process from just improper, stupid identification with the material and its meaning. He severs us from worldly attachments. And right now, what I want to say is that this epic churning is obviously taking place very acutely. The astrology of 2016 was very difficult, with a Rahu-Jupiter transit and with Kalsarpa Yoga in the heavens. And indeed, that Kalsarpa Yoga turns out to be in the chart of the very man who became the President of the United States at that period, Donald Trump. So in part 3 of that video, we'll be looking at his case example. Aggression is being stirred in the environment, in the collective, and it's certainly affecting individuals. People think it's all right just to sort of slash out their bad-mouthing and aggression, more so now. And these are difficult times, and there'll be a very difficult eclipse on the 21st of August, and the Kalsarpa Yoga will reassert itself. So the moral of this story, and look, the wind is arising as I speak of this present severe difficulty. The moral of this story is it's no good ungroundedly imagining images of light. It's no good ungroundedly walking around dressed in robes saying I am an epitome of light. We must not ignore our shadow. We must acknowledge our shadow. We must transmute our shadow. This is such an important principle, and half the cults around just simply have no idea that this is the sine qua non of spiritual growth. And so this story I've just told you contains the seeds of wisdom about serpent power. And the serpent was demonized in the story of Adam and Eve, obviously. You know, that was Yahweh orientated. It's found in the story of Hercules slaying the Hydra. And remember, for the ancient Egyptians, cobras were symbols of royalty. The pharaoh wore a uraeus on his headset. Cleopatra chose to die by a cobra bite. And the world serpent features in so many myths. For example, the myth of the eternal serpent with his tail in his mouth. For example, Jormungand, the world serpent of the ancient Norse, who with other forces of chaos, the prophecy is, will arise on the day of Ragnarok, when the magnificent sky god warriors and priests, the Aesir gods, will be destroyed. And of course a new turn of the wheel, a new era will happen. A boy and a girl will make their way to Mimir's grove and a new cycle of life will start. So just to close this, before we go on to the case example part 3, in the blog and of course in my course, if you do my course and you get to the planet Ketu, my courses work through all the planets in turn, studying analysis techniques in between. Well, basically it is so good to gain a visionary clear appearance of Ketu. I did a 5-year field study, an ethnography of spiritual forms new to the modern West, covering Hinduism, Buddhism, paganism, shamanism and utopian community. I lived in Tibetan Buddhist Gompas. I worked with highest yoga tantra, which is based on developing clear appearance of deity so that you can call the deity in when you need him. You can even become the deity. So I will be doing for students a journey to actually meet Ketu, and then they can go on to meet Ketu as he appears in their individual charts. So basically, very briefly, imagine a hissing, writhing, deadly venom serpent with its tail and body only. It is headless. It seems like a man who wreathes and weaves and swirls and grows from small to immense. It's miasmic. There's the mala beads around his neck, the bangles on his ankles, the spiral tattoos on his hands and body. And then you see with terrible shock, within this shifting vision is actually, goodness me, something very precise and physical. A sword, a discus and a mace. Vicious, sharp weapons that the miasma wields. So that, in a way, is a small bit of vision work with Ketu, the south node of the moon. And I quite specialise in visionary astrology, envision the pure nature of a planet, and then envision the way that pure nature appears in your chart and therefore in your life through filters of sign, house and aspects. Such understanding and therefore such healing and transformation can come out of my visionary astrology. So that's concluding part 2. Part 3 is a case example of Ketu in the chart of Donald Trump. Thank you.